If tomorrow starts without me, there's something you should know. While I hold you close, never let you go.
Hello and welcome to The Broken Pack, a podcast focused on giving adult survivors of sibling loss a platform to share their stories and to be heard, something that many sibling loss survivors state that they never have had. Sibling loss is misunderstood. The Broken Pack exists to change that and to support survivors. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Dean. In this episode, I spoke with author and grieving sibling loss survivor Renée Green Murphy about losing her brother Robert in a tragic automobile accident. We explore how she's honored him in her award-winning children's book, Your Heart's Voice. This book is on intuition for children. Renée's love for Robert and the continuing bond with him is palpable in our conversation and in her work and in her connection with her family. Take a listen.
Second guessing, 'cause you never know, you just never know.
Before we get into the conversation, I was wondering how you wanted to introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is Renée Green Murphy. I am a mom. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. And I'm now a children's book author of a book called Your Heart's Voice, which I decided to write last year after my little brother passed away in a car accident in New York.
Thank you for that. Before we talk about losing Robert and how you're doing, what would you like the audience to know about Robert?
There's so much I could tell you. He was a bright light. Anyone who knew him adored him. We run into people all the time to this day who they just stop and they start crying when they start talking about him. They smile simultaneously as they cry, which is real. It's a thing. And it's because he touched them in a way where they are still mourning and grieving in such a profound way. We're all just in a standstill still. We still can't believe that it happened. I know that there's a process with grief. I don't know what stage I'm at, but I know that I'm still not fully accepting. And everyone I run into, they almost feel similar, whether it's clients, customers that he had at the Italian restaurant he worked at, or his preschool friends, or his family, or my children's teacher that I didn't even know knew him and would sit at the bar and talk to him, and her mother and father. It's astounding how many people he touched on such a deep, deep, deep level. And the commonality in everything they say is how much they just loved him. And he was like a magnet for joy and peace and laughter and love.
Sounds like a wonderful human being. I think you had said at one point in our conversations before this that he also had a online video as bartending.
Yeah. So it was called the Crazy Bartender. It's here now. It's on YouTube. He, during COVID, flew to Miami, Florida during the lockdown. And one of the things Robert was very vocal about was his freedom and everyone else's freedom. They're not going to take it away. And so while we were locked down in New York, he got on a plane and went to go see his best friend in Florida, who lives in Brickell, which is a beautiful city of Miami. And Robert slept on the couch for a year and shot the Crazy Bartender, which is his YouTube channel where he teaches everyone, the public, how to make his gourmet cocktails, his signature gourmet cocktails that he created from scratch and that he made and sold in his Italian restaurant that he worked at on Long Island. So he made that commute back and forth weekly.
Oh, wow.
And I remember in the thick of COVID, his family being like, "What are you doing? This is crazy." In the very beginning of COVID, when we didn't even know what was really going on, he didn't have a care in the world. He followed the rules in terms of you have to wear a mask on the plane and all of that, but he wanted to live and he did what he loved, which was teach others, to immerse himself in his talents while being loyal to his customers back in New York. And that's why he would fly back every single week. I'm not even exaggerating. He did that for the first year. And then the second year, he ended up getting an apartment, his own apartment, and lived down there at SLX in Brickell. And so if you go to the Crazy Bartender channel on YouTube, you'll see we uploaded about 52 videos. Some are behind the scenes, but most of them are his drinks. He made, for instance, like the Manhattan, he'd make it 3 different ways. He'd have 3 different twists to it, and that was his signature way. But the rest are just all his unique drinks. A Fortunata is named after my mother, which is a chocolate Godiva martini. My mother's name is Fortunata. She's Italian. I know you are.
Yeah.
And like the lemon drop, but like not the typical drink you would get in a bar. Everything was from scratch. And he really just took great pride in his drinks. He was not just a mixologist. He was an entertainer. He was very, very, very talented. He was an actor. He could do no wrong. There were so many things he could do. He was the captain of a baseball, softball team for about 13 years. The ball hit him in the eye once and lost some of his vision, and still went back and played the game years later. He was just unbelievable. I know that sometimes people, they speak so highly and so positively of their loved ones, sometimes in a grandiose way, but everything I'm saying is not even an exaggeration. He really was this way. And I could say that as his older sister. I have 2 other siblings. There was 4 of us. Robert was the baby. He was just so special. And he looked at life in such a special way that the 3 of us didn't really look at life as.
Yeah.
He was just much friendlier and happier than we were.
How much older than him were you?
I'm 8 years older. And the oldest is my brother, Ryan, who is 10 years older. Robert was 10 years younger than him. And then my sister is 3 years younger than me. So 5 years. She was 5 years older than him. Robert was named after my dad. So he was the junior. He was they weren't planning on having a 4th. Let's put it that way, because Ryan was 10 at the time. I remember it's so crazy how things happen. We actually told this story. I wish I had the picture. It's downstairs. We have a photo, which I'll send it to you. It's the last photo we took as a family. And it was in April. He passed away in May. We were sitting at my sister's kitchen table. It was her son's birthday. And my mother just said, just intuitively, someone take a picture. I have all my 4 kids together at the same time. And so that photo is the photo we use all the time in regard to Robert, because it's the last picture of us and the most recent before the accident. And at that table, moments before my mom said that, actually, I don't know if it was before or after, we talked about this moment that I'm about to share with you, which was the day we found out he was born. How crazy that we just like randomly. And I remember getting off the bus and my mom was like waiting for us. And she said, we have an announcement. And I think we were waiting for my dad to get home from work. He was a New York City firefighter and a fire marshal for 30 years. And at the time he was a firefighter, I think just going to be promoted. And Ryan was at the table and Casey and me. And we went around the table and we had to guess what the surprise was. And Ryan thought it was a dog. And I was like, no, I thought it was food. I don't know. Don't ask. And my sister was like crying because she was the baby. And we were laughing. And then there's a photo of us at the table and we're all cracking up laughing this same day where we took the picture of us. And we're cracking up. I'm like crying, like we're like drinking, but like laughing so hysterically because it's so funny. And Robin's looking at us like, thanks. And that was the last picture we took. Right after that, we're all smiling at the camera, but that all happened like in the same afternoon. So I remember vividly when they told us, I was so excited. He was like the little baby. I would like help with diapers and we would dress him up and hide him in the laundry bin.
As an older sibling would do, I imagine.
He was born with a collapsed lung, so he was a miracle baby. I don't know if I told you this the first time we talked.
No.
My dad was as I said, in the city. Robert was born out here on Long Island when we lived, but he was born with a collapsed lung and they had to rush him to the city. I think New York Presbyterian. I don't remember which hospital, but like the best one for children's. I think it's New York Presbyterian. And he had a 5% chance of living.
Oh.
He was the sickest baby in the hospital, my dad said, and my dad stayed with him for weeks. And my mom was on Long Island. They had to take him away. And so she had just given birth and then healed and had to come home. But my dad stayed with him in the city. And then my dad always tells a story that on Good Friday, we're Catholic, my grandma Mary, which is my mom's mom, her name is Angel Marie. She told my dad, sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
She said, go to church and pray. It's Good Friday. Miracles happen. And he did. My dad's very religious. And when he got back to the hospital, he prayed like at the local chapel. And the doctors said to him, it's a miracle. His lung is working. And he went from 5% chance of living to making a full recovery.
Oh,
and
wow.
was released. I don't know how soon after, but yeah, he was perfectly healthy after that. He even smoked, which I used to yell at him all the time for, ironically enough. But he didn't have a care in the world like that. He wasn't, like I said, freedom. He just lived life. He just lived life. He ate what he wanted. He enjoyed life. He had a million friends. He just lived life, enjoyed life, really, to the fullest.
What was your relationship like with him?
Like a big sister, protective friend. My family would go on vacation with him. And the last day I saw him was in Miami because we were on vacation. We loved like where he lived. He lived in the most beautiful high-rise building in Brickell. It was like gold. It was gorgeous. We had no idea how beautiful it was. He didn't rave about it. He wasn't putting about it. He would just say it's nice. And we had no idea how nice it was until we got there. We went the February before he passed with my older brother, thank God, because I still have videos of taking the video around the apartment because I couldn't believe how gorgeous it was. The elevator took us right to his room, in his own elevator. And then when you walked in, he had this beautiful balcony, but there were 3 balconies. His roommate had his own balcony. Robert had his. It was February. The Christmas tree was still up. That was his roommate's doing, but it was just beautiful. Everything was decorated. It was pristine. Robert was not a neat freak. And the whole place was like, you couldn't see one morsel of lint and the bathroom. And I just remember videotaping being like, who cleaned this place? Who did this? We never even made his bed at home. And I was like, I need to show mom. And I was like taping it. And I did. And he's just laughing because I guess the roommate was like, I hope he doesn't see this, but like a little OCD with keeping things clean. But that's how like he was. He like did it for his roommate. You know what I mean? When really that was not in his character to be like that at all.
He didn't do it for siblings or his parents.
No.
Yeah.
No, my mom would do that. But Ryan came to that trip. That was February. And then we were just in shock. We went back the next year in February again. And then we went back in April. So I remember, again, I'm very intuitive. When we came back from that February trip the second time, we were like laying out at the pool and I have a picture of him in the pool with my kids and Robert didn't even swim. But of course he went in for them. He's like holding them on his arms. It's a beautiful pool that at his apartment and it's in their bedrooms. But I remember leaving that trip and saying to my husband, we got to go back. And he was like, we just spent a lot of money. And I was like, but we have to go back. It's just so peaceful and beautiful there. We'll just stay at Robert's the whole time, not like sleep there, but instead of being at the hotel and like staying there, we'll just stay in the city, go to Robert's every day. And meanwhile, my brother was working in Long Island. He wasn't even, he never worked in Miami, he just shot the video and would fly back. And at this point, he was working at 2 different places on Long Island. He left that job that he was working at for 11 years and he ended up working in the Hamptons and then in another town. So he had 2 jobs. He was driving a lot, which was also making us nervous. And something told me, I said to him, we got to go back. And he's like a month later, we were just there. And I was like, yeah, we have to go back. And we did. And Robert at first wasn't going. And I remember my husband was like, my husband was like best friends with Robert. And I remember my husband texted me a couple days before and he was like, Robert's not going to be there. And I was like, what? And I texted him and I was like, Robert, we're getting on a plane. What do you mean you're not going to be there? And he's like, I have to work. And I was like, you have to be there. And then a minute later, he texted me back, okay, I'll be there. That's just how he was. He just made things happen. He was so flexible, so easy. He was the kind of friend that just dropped things for his friends to be there to do it. He was the easygoing, laid back opposite of me, most would say. And he did. He flew there just for us. And we spent a couple days with him eating all around Miami. He had a bucket list with his best friend, Dave, that I initially talked about when he first moved there, of visiting the top 100 restaurants in Miami. That was his goal. And they got to 80 before he passed. He would photograph and videotape every single restaurant and every meal. It's all over his Instagram. You could go to it right now, Rob Green on Instagram. And it was soul food, most of it. Some of it's like music and baseball and softball and politics, but most of it is capturing all those great restaurants. So when we would go visit him, we'd go to the restaurants and then we'd just chill with him. When I went back that second time, that was the last day I saw him. I remember he left before us. So we were like spending the day at his pool. Some man again, it was very nice where he lived, and some man won $2 million on Bitcoin. He was like drunk and in the pool. No. That's how I know that. And he was like announcing it. And he looked at us, my family and my brother, and he was like, drinks on me, anything you want. And was like buying us lunch. And Robert wasn't even phased, just like laying there eating his chicken fingers, drinking a drink. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Not like phased. I just remember looking over at him and just like thinking, wow, he's just so chill. Like he doesn't get like easily excited. And he was like talking to my dad on the phone about like my dad picking him up from the airport. And we left soon after that. So we had to say goodbye to him. He walked us downstairs and I hugged him and I said, I love you. So it wasn't the last time I spoke to him, but it was the last time I saw him. And I to this day have dreams of him, and he's like always hugging me in my dreams. And I feel like it's because of that last day I saw him. I distinctly remember the feeling of hugging him that day. And so I have these dreams and he's in them and he'll hug me. And it's that same feeling. You know how you remember feelings in life?
Yeah.
You know, like a scent, like your five senses bring up the memory, but it brings back a feeling. I always remember that feeling of when I was able to hug him and say, I love you, be safe.
Are you able to draw on that when you need to?
I mean, I do. And then I break down and cry and I think about how much I miss him, and then I'm not going to be able to hug him again.
Yeah. So hard.
But I am grateful that I did. Some people don't have that opportunity. They're not speaking, right? I'm sure you've interviewed a lot of people and you've heard so many stories, but sometimes you don't get you could have a good relationship, but maybe you didn't get to be able to leave off on a good note on some level. And I had that, even though I didn't know that would be the last time I was able to hug him and say, I love you. And as the last time I saw him, I spoke to him the night that he passed through text. He was actually the last person I texted. But I'll always remember the last day I saw him. And I value that. And I do hold on to that. I'm grateful for that.
Good. What do you want to share about losing Robert?
What it feels like. It feels like being punched in the stomach and in the heart. It feels like a piece of you is ripped out and you have to just get up and keep going. There's okay days mixed with harder days, mixed with moments of what I find to be laughter now. And I do try to find something to be grateful for, whether it's my son making me laugh or my daughter's happy about something. I have two daughters. I try to find one moment a day that I can control, that I can be lighter about and maybe laugh about to balance the heaviness. I do find that as days go on, that's like the strategy I'm using.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a helpful one to find that balance because unfortunately grief is a marathon without an ending.
Especially because he was happy. Again, I don't know what it's like to lose somebody who was depressed or hated life and I'm not one to compare death or grief. I know what it's like to lose somebody who absolutely loved life and wanted to be here. And instead of looking at life now like I hate it, I try to mimic on some level, even if it's 1%, and remind myself of how much he loved life and lived life to the fullest. And that is what life is meant to be for, is to be lived, not, curled up in a ball, dying and hating and full of constant negativity. And I think that's such a hard battle. That's such a hard struggle, because it's easier to look at life that way when you're so crushed and hurt.
How long has it been since you lost him?
20 months. I try not to look at the timeline. I get very anxious. There's some things I can't do. Counting down that is hard for me. And his grave, those are two things I can't do. I could talk about him. I could write about him in my book. I could be interviewed. I've been interviewed a bunch of times by my local paper. I could be like interviewed and stopped in the middle of the store and talk to complete strangers and cry and smile about Robert. But those two things I can't do, the timeline and the grave. I don't know.
When I think, and I've talked about this before and posted about it, this whole math and timeline with grief, especially when we're supposed to have this person in our lives for.
I think that's one of the biggest things with sibling loss. And again, you know what that's like. You feel like your siblings they're cut from the same cloth and they're supposed to be with you during this journey, right? Even if your sibling might live in another state or across the country, they're usually similar in age and you expect them to be here, as opposed to grandparents and parents who eventually, pass because they're 30 years older, right?
Right.
And so that's part of the shock, and also that he was the youngest, as I mentioned.
And you also mentioned that you changed diapers and you took care of him a little bit too. So that older sister role, I wonder how that plays into your grief.
Yeah, I was always looking out for him on some level. Yeah, I don't know why. When that eye accident happened, my oldest she was only 3. And I remember my husband was like in the backyard in the middle of cementing an umbrella. So he physically couldn't move. And his brother was doing it with him. And I remember I got the phone call from my mom and I just grabbed my daughter and put her in the car and raced to the hospital. I was the first one there. My father, who doesn't have a cell phone to this day, which is like the most aggravating thing in the world. I think he does it on purpose at this point. Was like in the Bronx. I get it.
My dad has one and doesn't turn it on. So might as well not have it.
He had one and it was like, I don't know. He didn't use it. Yeah, I guess it was like that. And so anyway, he was like in the Bronx and then raced back. I don't know where my mom was. My mom's the one that called me. I guess she didn't have a car. And so she needed my dad. I just put my daughter in a stroller and she was in the hallway in the emergency room while Robert was in the room, and we waited for the plastic surgeon, and I'm the one that was with him when that happened. So yeah, I always kind of like took him under my wing in some way, but it's like a balance. Like I didn't want to be like too much like that because he was an adult.
Yeah. And he was your sibling, not your child.
Yeah. I used to call him B, and I got a tattoo, which I don't have any.
Yeah, on your thumb. Yeah.
And I never thought I would get a tattoo my whole life. I'm not like that. But I used to call him B Shadil.
Want to share? Why?
My grandma, my dad's mom, was like very funny and would teach me some words in Italian. And she taught me that word. And again, I don't know. So I was probably like 9 or 10 and he was a baby, and I would call him Bishadil and he didn't know what it meant. And then as he got older, he found out, either I told him or he asked and whatever. And I remember his face was like bright red. He was so embarrassed. And I shortened it to B. So pretty much most of his life after that, I just called him B, and no one kind of knew. I remember my dad just thought it was because he was the baby.
Clever.
And because he was so happy and everything was like, this is literally what he would do. That's why I got beyond.
Oh, so like the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. That's lovely. What a way to stay connected to that, and also some humor in there. It sounds like he had some
And
humor.
like even if like my kids do something, like one's a dancer and the other's an actor, and my son's always just jumping around. If they do something, like I could just be like, give them a thumbs up, and I feel like it's from me and him because they know what it means.
Nice. And so he died tragically in a car accident.
Yeah.
And that was not that long ago. Where do you think you are in your grief now? And I know that you've written the book and we'll talk about that, but where are you with your grief today?
I'm still not, I don't fully accept it still.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also not exactly where I was, the first, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a blur. Those were obviously the heaviest, kind of like that zombie.
Right.
/ you have a ton of bricks on your back feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mom of 3.
Oh, that's a great way to describe that.
Yeah. And I'm a mom of 3, and my kids are 10 at the time, 9, 6, and 3. And I couldn't, like lock myself in my room, or there were moments of that, but I had to get up every day. And the year that it happened, my son stayed home with me. He's now in preschool 2 days a week, but I wasn't ready to let him go. And I don't think he was either. So he was with me every day. I spent a lot of days at the beach. I found the only thing, and I don't like to use the word help because I feel like there's a complete solution to help or a positive result on some level. But I think what assisted my grieving and getting through the day was being able to go to the beach daily to meditate. And I felt most connected to him there. I don't know why, but I did.
I was going to ask, do you think it's because of those experiences you had in Miami with the beach?
Well, ironically, Robert didn't like the beach.
Oh.
So again, being flexible and doing what others wanted of him to keep peace and be so laid back, he would walk to the beach, take an Uber to where we were staying in South Beach, because he lived in the city, and would be walking on the beach with black sneakers on, black joggers, I kid you not, pants, and a t-shirt or like a tank top, and with a black backpack. And he would get to the beach with our like beach chair, and like he'd have a bag of snacks, and he'd lay there, and we'd be like, take your shoes off. Sometimes he had sandals, but he didn't like the feeling of sand. He didn't like the way it felt. And he'd be laying there like eating his chips. The seagulls would come and attack him, steal his chips. He'd just be like cracking up. He didn't know how to swim, so he didn't go on the beach. But he would sit there all day with us, because my family are beach people, and we'd get like spicy margaritas, and we'd sit there. And I remember the last trip I was listening to the Johnny Depp trial like on my phone, and I was like telling him all about it. I was so obsessed with it. And he was just like, just listening, and we were just, he liked the sun. He was tan, but he didn't like the feeling of the sand. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about the beach that puts my mind at ease, and I feel immediately grounded. And the sound of the water mixed with the smell, mixed with the feeling, my mind doesn't feel as heavy there. And that was before Robert. I always loved the beach. And then after, I actually feel more connected to him. So yeah, I could sit there and just look out at the water, and I feel like he's with me. I feel him in my house. Sometimes I smell him in my house, which I know are signs, because I'm like really in tune with all of that. And I get the cardinals, and he sends me songs on the radio, like all of that. I've been to a million mediums. But the beach, I feel like he's right there. And during my grieving, especially in the beginning, I was at the beach every single day.
Nice. It sounds like too, and I think we can shift into talking about how the book has helped you, but also you mentioned that you are naturally intuitive, and part of going to see him feels like you had to do this for some reason. There was some intuition around, I need to go see him. And your book, Your Heart's Voice, which is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. You're welcome. Is about intuition for kids. So what would you like to say about that?
So my book, I'll show you guys the cover. It's called Your Heart's Voice. See it?
Yep.
And if you notice, Jade, the main character, she's at the beach. And all the things on the cover actually are specifically there on purpose, but they all relate to Robert, spirituality, and my process. So you see there's a red cardinal, and there's the seagull that was stealing his chips. And on the sand, you see there's seashells in the shape of a heart. The sun is setting, and the heart here, which is supposed to signify her intuition. It's the color indigo, which is the color of our sixth sense. And it's our chakra, our third eye. And it's going down to where our heart is. And so the cover emulates intuition and my grieving process as a whole. Jade is 11, which is also an angel number. It means your angels are with you. And she's also a mix between a mix of all three of my kids. She has dark brown hair and tall like my oldest, and she has green eyes like my second child, Eden. My oldest is Avery, and she's wearing green throughout the story like my son, Sage. So instead of having three characters, I just wanted to mix them all into one. Everything has meaning. Also, the turtle, might I add, right after Robert passed on my trip to the beach, there was a turtle crossing the street in the parking lot. And I'm not really a big animal person. I don't dislike them, but I'm not obsessed with animals. And I had to stop. I didn't want anyone to run him over. And we saved him. And my son called him Charlie. We ended up taking him to my dad and put him in the backyard and fed him strawberries. And we gave my mom one job. Mom, watch the turtle. It's the turtle, mind you. Not a cat, not a dog. She had to just watch the turtle so we can get I think we were getting food, but we also wanted to get something to put him in so that he wouldn't leave the backyard. We were waiting for everyone to get home. And she lost the turtle. That was about 3 weeks after everything happened. And my son names every animal Charlie, which is also my dad's brother's name who died in Vietnam, Charlie, ironically. He doesn't know that, but he too is very intuitive. But the story is about this little girl, Jade, who learns to listen to her heart's voice, which she finds out at the end of the story is her intuition. And it's her Uncle Robert who teaches her what that is. So throughout the story, she learns 3 lessons. That's supposed to be me and my husband. One lesson is about cleaning up. Another lesson is about eating her vegetables. And the third lesson is about putting her dad's pen away that she used to draw an angel. And the angel is for her uncle. And you could see it's a boy angel. So the book isn't about death, but it's what I used during my grieving process. Here she is dreaming, and she's thinking about, what is that voice in my heart that I keep hearing? I have to find out. The next day she goes to see her grandma. My children call my mom Happy. And when she runs in, she goes and sees her uncle. That's him. He always wore
with the New York Mets.
Yeah, he loved the New York Yankees. He was wearing that
Yankees,
chain.
sorry.
What?
I said the New York Mets, so I apologize.
Oh, no, the Yankees. Oh, no, he's laughing at you.
I don't know anything about sports.
He wore that chain the night he passed. He always had that on. That's that picture I told you about, the last picture of us taken in April. That's my siblings and my parents. So the artist ended up painting real pictures of my family to make the book that much more personal. And this is her giving her uncle the angel, which her heart's voice told her to do. And that this is when he tells her that it's your intuition. He laughs. Robert was always laughing. And there's my dad sitting behind Robert. There's also a picture of my kids. Those are my children.
Nice.
And that's it. That's me.
Yeah.
I wrote the book, as I said, 6 months after he passed. I came up with the concept in 2017 after Eden was born, my second child. It was like on the treadmill, thinking, talking to my husband, saying I have to do something. I had stopped working as a school counselor in Harlem when I gave birth to my first child. It was too long of a commute to go back and forth. And after my second child, I was starting to think about what else am I going to do? I've been a stay-at-home mom now. I need to do something. I've always wanted to write a children's book. And so I came up with the concept then when I researched that there were no children's books written about your intuition, what it means, and how to use it. There were teen books and there were adult books. There were books written by psychologists. There were parenting books, but there were no children's books, picture books to show children, because it's hard to come up with the concept and visualize it. And children need that visualization to learn, right? That's why children's books are so important. And that's when I came up with the concept, Jade, which means the jewel of the heavens. Her name was Divine back then, which is also a spiritual name. And then I put it down and I came back to it 6 months after the accident. Again, the beach, and I needed to channel my grief. And I found something told me, my heart's voice told me to pick up my manuscript and start writing again. And so I did. I changed Divine to Jade and I added Robert to them as a main character, and then I dedicated the book to him, and that's him.
Beautiful.
The book is like twofold. One piece of it is about my grief, and it's very, very, very spiritual, and it's a way for my family and I to honor Robert and his legacy forever. The other is I genuinely feel like your intuition is your God-given gift. We all have it. It doesn't discriminate. It's not just for children. My book is also a gentle reminder for adults that this is something we all have. And I think as we get older, as the chaos ensues and life becomes that much more demanding and chaotic, we're less clear. And when we're less clear, we lose that voice. And my book is also a reminder for adults, but it's for anyone all over the world to tap into that voice in your heart, because it's there to guide you, to help you in your path, whatever that may be. We make the wrong choices a lot to learn from them, but it also can keep us in like a dead end. And your intuition and your conscience, your gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, is there to make life a little easier, especially for children nowadays. They are subjected to so much on the internet, things that their minds can't even comprehend. And there's a lot of following going on, talking about things they don't even know about just based on YouTube alone, because the internet is so vast and it's so easily accessible for them, that I wanted to write this book to remind children that once you start listening to your heart's voice and you make good choices and you tap into your independence, you immediately raise your self-esteem. You boost your self-confidence and your self-worth. That to me is one of the most important things in life, is to instill self-confidence in our children so that they become self-confident adults. You don't really lose confidence if you are a strong, self-confident child, right? Whereas on the flip, if you have low self-esteem as a child, that's like a lifelong journey that you're trying to navigate throughout life. It could just make life that much more harder. My book is also for that purpose. And my brother was very confident. And I think he would want that. He would want this message shared with as many people as possible. So right now it's available online on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, Google Play, iTunes. I'm in the process of transitioning, but it's still going to be online. And it's in like the local school district where I live on Long Island, as well as the public libraries throughout Long Island.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know when I read it, I was in awe of how you took this abstract concept that would be difficult to explain to children and were able to make it, I won't say simple, but in a way that they could understand it. And so thank you for that. It also sounds like for your grief process that it helped you stay connected to Robert and honor him in a way that
I'm going to the post office after this to mail 5 books out. Every time I mail my book out or I talk about my book, it's an immediate reminder. I include my business card in every book because it has my QR code on Amazon, but I also include Robert's. And we had these made after he passed. Again, this is him with one of his professional photos from his YouTube channel. but on the back is his QR code to his Crazy Bartender. So they go hand in hand. Yeah, it's definitely a reminder every day. My purpose right now. And I remember talking to Robert about his life purpose. That last day I saw him in Miami, he took us to a cafe. And ironically, it was called Friends. I might have told you the story. And the
I think you did.
logo was the Friends logo from the show. And as we were walking there, there's a picture of Robert with my daughters and he's holding their hand. Something told me to take a picture of it. My husband's friend actually put wings on his back and got it painted because it's such a beautiful picture of him with my daughters. But he's walking us to the Friends Cafe. And I remember saying to him, is this like really affiliated with Friends? Because it's the same logo of the coffee cup. And he cracked up laughing and said, no, this is like a Cuban restaurant. It's totally illegal what they did, but it's also genius. And it was. But I remember I sat there across the table and had a 20-minute conversation with him about life and his next steps. All of these things I don't think just happened or a coincidence.
Of course not. Yeah.
And we were talking about his purpose. And so my purpose right now, I think, is to get my book into as many hands as possible. And then maybe write 2 more because everything in my life always happens in 3. So I'll probably have 2 more sequels.
Great. I look forward to
Thank
those.
you.
Are there other things that you want to share about grief or loss or sibling loss specifically?
I heard a quote from the actor that was married to Angelina Jolie. He's a good actor. It'll come to me. But he said something like, once you lose a loved one, the rest of your life, you equally feel sadness coupled with joy. And you make that sacrifice for the rest of your lives.
Wait, I know this because I just heard this quote the other day. Was it Billy Bob Thornton?
Yes.
I think. Yes. Yeah.
And that's it.
I recently saw that. It is
How
true.
true is that?
Yeah. Right.
And then he said, and you're willing to make that sacrifice, meaning I just felt happy, right? We got the house we wanted to move into or anything, right? Your daughter just did so well on this test, or your son got the team he wanted to be a part of. As soon as you feel that little bit of joy, as soon as you feel that feeling, you're immediately met with equal sadness.
Right.
And that equal sadness is your way of also honoring and remembering and loving them. Right? And that is now your life. And that I've accepted more than him not being here. I've accepted that reality.
Right. I think acceptance and grief is a difficult thing because a lot of times people think acceptance means approval and it doesn't. They're not the same word. Right.
Yeah.
And so learning to live with our grief.
Yeah. I don't like the word acceptance.
It sounds like you're describing.
Yeah. What do you use?
I use acceptance,
Cope.
but that's because I have a different view on that. But I think for a lot of people, it's a difficult word. I think, coping and learning to live with the loss, and simultaneously, how can we experience loving and living in joy while also knowing that grief has changed us and changed how we live.
Yeah. And I remember early on when you're in that, the tons of bricks on your back, walking around like an empty zombie feeling, people don't know what to say, whether it's people who have lost someone or not. And I mentioned to you before, you should never compare grief, but sometimes you're met with people who say they had lost their grandmother who was like 99 and in your mind, you're thinking that's your path. And that's horrible because, losing someone is horrible. But in your mind, you're thinking, I just lost my 33-year-old brother who only lived a quarter of his life. It's hard when you don't want to minimize anybody else's, but then you find that people don't know what to say. And there's also that balance of them saying the wrong thing versus not saying enough versus not saying anything, maybe sugarcoating it or being insensitive. I find that saying something is better than nothing. I also never appreciated when people would say moving on or words like this helped you, or moving on, moving forward. Those things to me make me feel like I'm leaving my brother in the past.
Moving on, definitely I agree with you on that, because it's moving on quite literally means
From.
you are leaving something from.
Yeah. And
I like to say moving forward, because that's taking that person with us, that movement and moving with grief.
Yeah.
I don't know about the help though. Like, I think you and I disagree on that one a little bit.
What? When
I hear what you're
what?
saying about what's helped you. I think I have a different viewpoint on that, but thank you for sharing that in your mind that is also moving on or leaving him in the past.
Yeah. Because I feel like there's like a finite end to help. And I feel like it's a evolving process of healing, which I'll never be healed from. So again, there's no like end result there. I can help you study for a test. I can help you write a book. I can help you bring the groceries inside, right? And then it's like, it's finished. That finite like end result, and I think that's why I struggle with that word. But
I hear that. I think of it too as if someone's had a leg amputated or something, and grief is often compared to that. They might still need help to function, like with a wheelchair or a prosthetic or something. And so I think of it in that way, like what's helping you live despite this enormous pain.
Yeah,
versus
assisting. Yeah.
Healing, because healing isn't something we can do.
But I also remember a quote in the beginning where someone said, at some point, you're always going to feel this tremendous pain and sadness and heaviness. But what happens over time, your heart starts to make room, and it grows, and it makes room for joy again, for happiness again, for laughter again. So this pain and sadness and this heaviness doesn't go away, right? That's the moving on that we don't agree with. You just make room for the positivity again as time goes on. And that I think also is synonymous with what Billy Bob Thornton was saying.
Yeah.
In some like visual. It's like a visual to what he was saying.
I like that. I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to check in and see what favorite memories you wanted to share about Robert.
Robert loved Pearl Jam. If you go to his Instagram, you'll see he was quoting Pearl Jam days up until this happened. Given to Fly was one of them. And we ended up putting that on a plaque that we made, that we engraved in a bench that we gave to my parents. He was, as I said, somebody who just really loved life. I loved my kids, loved children. Sometimes that doesn't happen, especially with men if they're not your own children. But I loved his nieces and nephews, was always posting about them on his Instagram and his Facebook. Just loved his family, loved his friends, had the same friends from preschool. Again, not something you can say often about people. And at the same unit, and then evolved and met more friends, but didn't let go of that foundation. He loved good food. He loved good drinks. He loved sports. He loved the New York Yankees. He loved the Jets, even though he hated them at the same time. I never understood that. He'd be like cursing at the TV screen, saying how much they sucked, but would watch them. And it was new. Every single player and every stat with any sport was very, very much into sports. He was an actor earlier in life. His professor and the director of the theater program came to the wake. And that was from 15 years prior. And I remember the professor saying to me, I learned more from him as an actor than he could have ever learned from me. I'll never forget those people that I met that day, because they all came through me and my family and my parents to get to Robert. And they just all told us, 500 people at his wake, they all told us a personal story of how he touched them. And I remember those stories, and we ended up creating a website, robgreen.com, so that people can share their stories online, and you can go online and read about how these stories were so touching. And it's like an online journal. You can write, and if you don't want to write, you could just read. but the stories were never ending. The line was wrapped around the funeral home for an hour and a half, and I forgot some of them because we were in that blackout zone, but I remember a lot. And I remember how generous he was. People telling me he gave them brand new cleats out of his trunk that he had just bought. And they're like, I'm going to keep it in the box. Nike cleats. And another guy said, I saw him at the bar and he was counting his money. And he said, they don't pay you enough here. And he like grabbed like a 20 and shoved it down my shirt. And another guy was like, I remember looking for him because all the wait staff would meet at one place when they all got off their shift, and all the hospitality people, and they all would flock to Robert. He'd be in the back doing like magic tricks. And they were like, who is this guy? And I'm Rob Green. I'm the greatest bartender you'll ever meet. And he wasn't like cocky. He was very confident, as I said earlier, but not in an arrogant, distasteful way. People would just flock to him. Like I said, he was a magnet. And people that came to the wake were like, I had just met him 3 months ago and I love this guy. And there were people that knew him for 20 years, 30 years, and 5 months, and they were bawling. I will remember how many people he touched, and I'll remember all of it. I have way more good. I never fought with Robert. He didn't fight with his siblings. Again, something you can't say with a family of 4 or 6. We weren't perfect, but we fought, the other 3. Nobody fought with him. So I have very fond memories. Yeah. And my dad even takes my book and gives it to the mailman. And I think he thinks he's like my manager or something. He wants to just get it into the public just as much as me. Yeah.
Yeah. I will put links to all of that in the show notes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. Our theme song was written by Joe Mylward and Brian Dean and was performed by Joe Mylward. If you would like more information on The Broken Pack, go to our website, thebrokenpack.com. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter, Wild Grief, to learn about opportunities and receive exclusive information and grieving tips for subscribers. Information on that, our social media, and on our guests can be found in the show notes wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share. Thanks again.
You're second guessing, oh, you never know, you just never know.